Welcome to the Real Estate Show on KMED. It's February the 13th of 2016. Pete Belcastro with you today. I'm a real estate broker with John L. Scott in Southern Oregon, and we get together with you once a week here on KMED to talk about all sorts of real estate-related issues and topics. And, well, you know, we never run out of things to say in 5.5 years, over 300 shows here on KMED. And, of course, we thank you for joining us because, boy, we've learned a lot, haven't we, over the years with some great, terrific guests like today. Well, you know, rural properties are just in such demand right now. We look at those statistics, you know, that came out of the SOMLS for the previous 3 months, and it's, you know, every month there's, 60 to 70 rural properties changing hands. That's a lot of new people who are moving onto these properties. And they're unique. They're so different than living in town, you know, because you live in town, you never have to think about septics and sewers and, you know, issues like that. But you certainly do if you live in a rural property. Amy Patton is a registered geologist and has been on our show before. And this is it's interesting that you've taken this kind of track with water and with warning people and talking to people about this, isn't it? It's a good thing to do, though.
Well, my work history, I worked up at Department of Environmental Quality in Portland for about 10 years, running the groundwater protection program before I moved back to my hometown, Ashland.
Okay.
And so I kind of picked up starting to do similar things down here with taking a look at area-wide water quality, natural water quality, which in this area there's naturally occurring arsenic, there's naturally occurring fluoride. And not very many rural residents seem to know that. They might have those constituents in their well water. So I've been working with Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District and Medford Water Commission and Jackson County Health to get the word out to people that they should be testing their well water periodically for bacteria and nitrate, which are man-caused contaminants, but also the naturally occurring contaminants, arsenic and fluoride, which are in the area. And generally people think fluoride's a good thing because, you know, you have it in a certain amount, it's a good thing. But the amount that, you know, municipalities talk about putting in well water in their water supply is 0.7 parts per million. But what the drinking water standard is 4 parts per million for fluoride. And there's a health advisory of 2 parts per million where your children's teeth might start to get white splotches on them or get mottled. And
you start to sound like Flint, Michigan a little bit there, don't you, Amy? But people,
we have those high levels around here.
What is the biggest issue? I mean, I know you don't test the water itself, but when people do, what is generally the problem they're going to find in the Rogue Valley? Because most of us are going to say we got the best darn water in the world here, you know, but that isn't necessarily the case. So what are the big problems that you see?
No, we do have great water. By and large, the water in a lot of the wells around here is very good. And you know, you might have some sulfur, which you can smell, or you might have some high calcium or sodium, but those are things you can treat and accommodate. The naturally occurring things are not in every well.
Each one's different.
It's related to the geology of the area, and there's going to be some areas that have it and some areas that don't. But what I recommend to people is that they test their water and see if they have it. And then in these areas, in these times where we've got several years of drought where your water levels might be drawing from a different part of the aquifer than in times when we've got a lot of water, which are the times coming up now, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so.
Your water quality might change. So you might want to test your water again this year to see if it's changed from the past few years.
I would bet we can say that if you haven't done it in a long time or even whatever, this would be the year to do it because your well level probably dropped considerably in the last year. And as it comes back or whatever recharges, it may have something different in it. That would be a smart thing to do for people, that's for sure. Well, Curtis Johnson is a principal broker from Harcourt's Oregon Opportunities. It's a real estate office here in the Valley. And Curtis has been here before. And just tell us a little bit about your name, because I just want you to give a chance, because Harcourt's, when I saw that, I didn't know what that was. And but it's anyway, tell people what that is, and welcome back to the show, Curtis.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Pete. Harcourt's actually started in New Zealand in 1888 and then migrated to Australia and the Philippines and then Thailand, and then arrived in the U.S. and Southern California about 2 years ago. And they entered Oregon just this last year with their opening their first office in Bend, and they're opening offices up and down the I-5 corridor. And I think their objective is world domination, but it's a different approach. It's a franchise, obviously.
It's a franchise, a real estate franchise out of Australia that's come into here. Mm-hmm. Good, huh? Yeah. Yeah, you like that? It's working okay?
We do. We've been independent for a long time, yeah. And there's some advantages to that, but the franchise brings additional tools and training to the table that either we didn't have or couldn't afford.
Yeah, so Harcourt's would be like a name like Remax, big world names, I suppose, in real estate. Well, now you in particular, in your office a lot, sell a lot of rural properties. I know you're involved with them, a lot of listings. I've watched your guys. In fact, your office had the biggest sale in 2015 at the Boxar Ranch, which closed at $3.9 million, I think. Did you get any of that, by the way? That'd be a heck of a sale, wouldn't it? Anyway,
that was a good one for Joel Lucuzzi in our office.
It sure was, Joel. Yeah. Now, but the issue that we're talking about are wells, and I know that you have come across issues like we all do when you deal with rural properties in terms of wells and this kind of thing. And there are new rules now regarding wells and testing and everything, aren't there?
Well, they've been in place for some time where water quality in terms of coliform nitrate and now arsenic, those results needed to be forwarded to the state. There's really no enforcement capacity on the part of the state, but we encourage compliance simply in that it creates a database of information for others to draw upon. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah.
And it's a safety mechanism for the buyer to know what they're getting.
What when you see wells and buyers and sellers and dealing with these kinds of problems, what do you see? What have you experienced with that, Kurt, in your real estate world?
Well, like Amy said, there are a number of treatment alternatives for water. And so it could be filtration, it could be reverse osmosis, it could be any number of things. I know I had a well on my ranch, and it was high in sulfur. And so we installed 2 pressure tanks that bled off that gas at the top, and then by the time it reached the house, it had been filtered. It was acceptable.
Really?
But at the source, it was totally unacceptable. So, usually there's some sort of remediation technique that can be taken on a property. Sometimes point source, sometimes the entire system. But having contaminants in the water isn't necessarily the death knell. It requires attention.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons we're here is the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, who sponsors our programs here, have many continuing education classes that real estate brokers attend during the year. And so we're actually bringing you some of these types of topics that realtors are also facing, because you as a buyer or seller at some point in this kind of transaction are going to have to deal with these things. And the better prepared you are on both sides is going to make the transaction work, because I'm sure, Kurt, these things can blow up and people walk away, and man, it can really cause a lot of issues and problems for people.
Well, they can, and it's I don't think it's necessarily our role to be the experts in each one of these fields, right. But I think it is our role to find out who those people are and pass that information on to advise our buyers and sellers.
Yeah, that's it. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say there is an alternative too. If you have a well on your site that's got a high sulfur or a high mineral content that you can't get adequate treatment for, there's another alternative. It's not a real easy one, but I've seen it successfully done on several large rural properties where you can collect the rainwater. You can collect an awful lot of rainwater off of your home, off of your barn. And if you have big storage containers, I've seen some properties where they have sufficient storage to last them all summer long, which is pretty amazing. And rainwater is pretty good quality.
Well, I've seen places with, in fact, who did that outside of Ashland, and they put a 2,500-gallon tank onto a small barn. It really wasn't a very big barn. That thing overflowed on after the first rainstorm, and they were just shocked that much water did come off that small roof and into that
You
tank.
can
It's really
calculate
true.
it.
But in terms of well water, Amy, this is one of the things that we talk about, recreation marijuana and people growing these type of things, is how wells are limited, right? You just can't do what you want with a well, and that's something that we hear Kurt say also, that people who are coming here need to know that.
Oh, your domestic well is for domestic purposes. Unless you have a water right for irrigation, you are not allowed to use your domestic well for irrigation of over a half an acre.
Yeah.
And but there are rural properties with irrigation rights on irrigation ditches or irrigation rights on irrigation wells.
Yep.
Some properties have irrigation rights on ponds. But be careful if you have a pond on the property you're looking at.
You better find out you know what you're doing
Talk
with it.
to the Water Resources Department. Make sure it's a legal pond, or else you might find yourself in some trouble.
And people need to know that just because the water flows through your property, you don't have necessarily the right to it. So
That's right.
And things like that, you really need to know that. What do people do with? I've heard a lot of there can be problems with abandoned wells, and I was asking both of you how many wells we have in Jackson County. And I tried to look that up, by the way, and I haven't been able to find it. It's got to be in the thousands. But there's a lot of wells that are not working that have been abandoned. And is that a problem? What should we do with them? Or tell me where that should go.
Well, Jackson County farms have been around a long time. So there's, back in the early days, a lot of the wells were quite shallow.
Yes.
And that worked for a while. But these days, the shallow well is generally much more susceptible to contamination and also going dry. So a lot of properties have drilled additional wells or deeper wells on their property. And oftentimes what happens is the old well is just left out there in the field.
Yeah.
And over time, it's forgotten about. There's no cap perhaps on it. And the problem with those wells is they are conduits down into the groundwater.
Right.
For contaminants. So either things can fall down into them, including, small rodents and birds, or contamination can be poured into them. I've seen pictures of abandoned wells stuffed with trash. I've talked to a homeowner who, was so thrilled that they had a RV dump well on their site. You don't want to mistake an old abandoned well for an RV dump site.
Yeah, that's bad. That's kind of a bad thing.
Because
but they're out there.
That material can find its way to your drinking water.
Kurt, what would you do? What should someone do if they find one of these on their property? What's the right way to take care of an abandoned well?
Avoidance. I mean, cap it, and then
cap it.
If you can cap it and weld a cap on, and a number of drillers are willing to do that when they come in and put in a new facility, and then seal it.
And that's the best way to take care of it, right?
The best way to take care of it is to what's called decommission it. And Water Resources Department has materials that'll tell you exactly how to do that.
Okay.
You can look it up online. You can talk to a driller. They will do it for you. You either remove the screen and fill the hole, or you can just fill the hole with a bentonite slurry, a cement, something like that. That will.
I wonder what it costs to do that. I don't know. I wish I knew.
I don't have a good estimate.
Some people, that might be a really smart way to do that, and especially all the things that we talk about trying to get better water quality here in the valley, those things would make some sense to do.
I mean, capping is a real cheap alternative to that, but you have to consider that the well casing itself, and some of these older wells don't have even casings all the way down, so they might be 100 feet or more deep, and if contaminants get into the subsurface, they can get into that hole, which essentially will just shoot whatever contamination down to the bottom. And
you're right about
mix
one thing.
it.
We do have soils, all different types of soils throughout the county. I mean, it's not even all the way across wherever you go. Different types and different, as we found out during the old land use hearings, remember that we have this and this type of land around. Well, I would assume that most people, or rural properties, can really get in trouble regarding septics. Is that a fair statement that you experience out of this thing? Is that it could be problems, right? Problematic.
Well, they are, and I think that the first technique that many owners use is ignore it, and maybe it'll go away.
Yeah,
and that usually doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. But with the different geology that we have from one end of the valley to the other, there's a number of different septic systems that are available to owners, and that's a good thing. Some of them are quite expensive, and some of them are quite simple. Mm-hmm. Some of them all of them require a certain amount of routine maintenance, either pumping or the effluent itself, or if it's a sand filter, there's a membrane to clear periodically.
Hold the thoughts there, because we're going to come back and talk about this, because septics can ruin deals, and especially owners, sellers need to be aware that your system, just because you say it works, doesn't necessarily mean it works right. That's the big thing. We're on the Real Estate Show today here on KMED. We're talking about rural properties with Amy Patton and Curtis Johnson. We're coming right back here on AM 1440, FM 106.7, right after this. Real Estate Show rolls on KMED for February 13th of 2016. Pete Belcastro with you. And again, thanks for being with us this weekend here on the Real Estate Show. You know, all of our shows are available at realestateshoworegon.com. You can watch them there or on YouTube. We invite you to do that, and please tell your friends. Next week, we'll be out at the Home Builders Home Show out at the Expo Park for the annual event out there. Remember, that's the only time they used to do 2 of those, a year, and they cut that back to 1, and smart move, and that'll be next week from the Southern Oregon Builders Association. We'll be out there at this time next week with you live, so we're looking forward to that as well. Well, today here on the Real Estate Show, we're talking with Amy Patton, a registered geologist, and Curtis Johnson from harcourtsorup.com. It's a real estate office here in the Rogue Valley. Curtis is a longtime real estate broker in rural properties. You've also been a past SOMLS board member, right? You did
yes.
that too? You did? Yeah, good. Well, thank you for that.
3-year tour duty.
Everybody's got to do a little bit of that.
That's right.
Serving.
Yep.
It's really good. I'm amazed just from being a new real estate broker over 10 years ago now, but what agents do beyond just sell houses. There's a lot that goes on, that people are wonderful in what they do, as you know. Anyway, we've been talking here about rural properties and the demand that we're seeing from them and the issues that come up for buyers and sellers in rural properties. And again, every year it seems like we're getting over 500 to 600 of these sales of rural properties. So that's a lot of new people living who didn't live in these places last year. So that's kind of what we're aiming to today. We were talking about septic systems, and let me get back to that just briefly with this thing, Curtis and Amy, is that people really need to have them checked. And there are really cool new systems right now. I mean, the new technology, I assume, must be amazing compared to the old drain fields and old systems, right? Is that right?
I don't think it's rocket science so much, but it does allow you to treat your septic on a smaller
scale,
smaller sized lot than you used to need for the standard septic system, where you would have a septic tank and then you would have a big drain field, and then you would need a whole nother empty treeless area for a replacement drain field in case the first one failed, which they do fail eventually.
They will fail eventually. That's really true. Well, people need to be aware of them, and you've seen it. I know I've seen deals fall through because septics are not working right, or some people don't even know where they are. It's amazing the different the stories, let alone ever pumped one out, or they say, I've taken care of. I've lived here 20 years. I put stuff in it every month, and it works until you get the inspections and things like that. So we just want you to be aware of those, right?
That's really true. And I know in my own personal case, where the last 2 rural properties I bought, the seller wasn't around to find out what the systems were. So I took the risk. I didn't even know where the septic lid was located. And had a service provider come out to pump it, and it was good enough to ascertain where that was at, and pumped it out, and lucked out they worked fine.
And as a seller, you have to pump it out. It's your responsibility to have that septic pumped. So there's a lot of things that go with it. Now, let me ask you both this question, because we have the wonderful Medford Water Commission, which delivers so much water. We've got it used to be called the Bear Creek Valley Sanitary Authority. Now it's called Rogue Valley Sewer. I love that name. I like the anyway. The question I've got for you, and I think a lot of our listeners would probably like to know, is, we limit so much where we allow water to go and where we allow sewer lines to be built and go. We're expanding our urban area. We know that. We've gone through regional problem solving. We've gone through all these recent hearings regarding urban reserves and annexations in 20-year reserve lands. Can't we go out and get more of these hooked up, knowing we're going there, which would solve a problem for wells and that kind of thing that we talked about? It would help with septics failing in lots of different places. You ever see that happening, or what is your thought on that?
There are some areas of the Rogue Valley that have really poor soils for septic systems, and Jackson County's done a lot of work looking at that over the years. They used to run the septic system registration or certification program, but now that's gone back to DEQ. But Jackson County has identified these kind of hazard areas, hazardous sewer areas.
Are they bringing this to them now? They're doing some of this?
This actually was done years ago.
So there is some out there, right? But not very much, right, Amy? That's what it is?
In response to the declaration of these hazard areas, they have put some sewer lines into these areas.
Okay.
And quite a few of them, actually.
A few, but not very many compared to the amount of homes and properties that are out there.
Well, the authority has an opportunity to create local improvement districts if you can gather up enough people in a particular area to share costs, to bring in lives and provide service that way. It's kind of akin to the gas company. If they can spin enough meters and make an economic return on that, they will. And so the water's a little bit different because they're constrained by city limits, but the sewer authority isn't. I mean, that you can get sewer if you're close enough.
So the two of those are that different then. Mm-hmm. So that's why Rogue Valley Sewer then is able to go out and bring these lines into more rural areas than the Medford Water Commission, of course, does not do that at all.
They have to go through Jackson County planning process to show that one is needed in that area. And I think if you guys, you realtors who are out there all the time seeing properties that are having failed sewer areas, let them know about certain areas that really need one, they would probably consider it.
Well, when you say that, they're going to fail at some point, and as we expand into these areas, as they come in, I guess not quite into the cities yet, that some of those services would be nice to have there. It would certainly help with water issues and sewage issues and things like that. So we'll see if that ever happens. I don't know. I don't hold much hope for that one.
But in the meanwhile, if you have the opportunity to converse with the seller about a property, if they can tell you where their drain lines are and how often they've pumped it out and show you their maintenance records, you can be pretty certain that they've done a good job of keeping track of it, and you're going to have some good luck with that system. But
and sellers who have that information for the buyer, here's my report on my sewer, here's my water stuff. It just makes everything, that's being a smart real estate consumer right there. Before we get out of this breakout of the thing, I want to talk to you about another issue that I find a lot at times are fuel tanks that are on rural properties, and they could be buried underground. I've seen them buried in barns. They're just. I'm surprised that there are that many, but then I'm really not when you think about what things were like back in the day. Why is that an issue? Why is that such a problem or something anymore?
Fuel tanks, heating oil tanks, not so much propane because that's a gas, but your fuel tanks have a tendency to leak over time. And some of the fuel tanks, especially around an older home, might be underground. They've been susceptible to, surrounded by wet soils. they can develop a hole and begin to leak. Or sometimes the leak could just be over time when they've been filled. A little bit spilled, just a little bit every time that it's been filled over the decades. And even that small amount of contamination can cause soil contamination.
Now, does I'm trying to think. You need to disclose that, right? If you're a seller, that you have a fuel tank on the property, is that required or not?
Any material fact on the property, and if there's a tank on the property and you know about it, have to disclose it.
Yeah, but you may not. You may have never used it. You may not even. Some people don't even know that they're there. So those are the kind of issues that you face with it.
It's a possibility that it was used by a prior owner, and there have been a couple ownership changes, and they don't know. That can happen.
And so people want to fill these in. Is it smarter to remove them or leave them there, fill them up, or what would you recommend?
I like to see them come out.
Come out. Okay.
Personally, I just think that's the ultimate solution. You can fill them with a slurry, but then you have to test underneath it and all around it to make sure that you've done it right. So
yeah, you're right. Take it out.
Get it out.
Smart. I mean, they're not that big. They're like 200-300 gallons, I would assume most of those would be on most properties.
But it's hard to get a soil sample from underneath it when it's still there.
Yeah, that's true. We got one more segment to go on the Real Estate Show today with Amy Patton and Curtis Johnson here on KMED. Don't forget, you can watch any of our real estate shows at realestateshoworegon.com. We hope you'll do that, and please tell your friends. We're coming right back after this. Real Estate Show continues here on KMED, February 13th. Hope you're having a good weekend for you. Make something happen, enjoy something, get out and do something. That's for sure. I appreciate that. Pete Belcastro here with you. Next week we'll be out at the Home Show, this time at the Southern Oregon Builders Association. Hope many of you will make some plans to join it February 19th, 20th, and 21st next week. Don't forget, you can watch any of our shows at realestateshoworegon.com or on YouTube. We also want to remind you, by the way, we're with Amy Patton today, a registered geologist, and Curtis Johnson from Harcourt's OROP. It's a real estate office here in the Valley. And you've got an event coming up, Amy, on March 4th and 5th. It's a free agriculture pesticide collection event, all right?
Right. We're collecting unused, unwanted pesticides from agricultural properties. The pre-registration is required by February 18th, and you can go to medfordwater.org, the Medford Water Commission website, to get the registration form and any additional information. The events take place on March 4th in Grants Pass and March 5th in White City.
So they want 55-gallon drums only, correct?
No. They'll take any size container.
Oh, the size limit is 55 gallons.
The size limit is 55 gallons, but they'll take anything. They did one event last year, and they had pallets of DDT that people were pulling out of their garages. And so, if you're showing a property and there's a bunch of stuff in the shed that you need to get rid of before the sale, this is a great opportunity.
Listen to what they're going to accept here. I love this. DDT. I mean, how many people have DDT in their house or
Hopefully not many.
In their barn? 7. that stuff. Marathon. I mean, all sorts of strange names that you don't even want to know about. So that's March 4th and 5th.
So this is not a household hazardous waste event. Right. There will be one of those in the Rogue Valley on May 6th.
This is for agriculture people.
This is for small and large farms.
Okay, there we go. So that's March 4th and 5th. Those are wonderful things, by the way, when they do these things, to allow people to take this stuff into and get rid of it. That's because we buy so much of it that we're so crazy spending all this money on.
This is not an annual event, so this is going to be the last chance for a long time, so get in on this.
It's a great event, especially if you're a new homeowner and the prior owners left you a bunch of treats.
Right.
It's really a great service.
Yeah. Well, Medfordwater.org.
And you say it's both in Grants Pass and in Medford, correct?
In Grants Pass and Medford, and we're planning to get stuff from Klamath Falls and Douglas County as well.
Well, yeah, get rid of that stuff. We don't need it, at all. Last topic here about dumping on your property. That is, people do that, but dumping crap on your property, right? You don't want to do that.
Well, it's more of an old old practice. You know, a lot of the old homesteads used to just have their own dump sites.
They have their own dump sites,
and,
right? Yeah.
You know, there's still some people who don't want to pay the dump fees and utilize the depression on their rural property to get rid of stuff. But it's you know, it can come back and bite you again. It can contaminate your own water supply, or the creek, or you know, it can kill your dog, or you know, whatever it is you're putting out there. So
and who knows what they're putting out there? I mean, if people have DDT in their barns, then who knows what can go out in someone's dump, right? I mean, I can imagine.
Car batteries.
Oh yeah, that's not good. So I mean, and
we've got great opportunities to get rid of this stuff. Household hazardous waste events happen every year. In the spring in the Rogue Valley, and in the fall in Grants Pass, and those are great opportunities to get rid of stuff like that.
In the time we got left here, I'm curious as to, Curtis, the real estate market itself in Jackson County is really, it's moving along, you know, quite well. Rural properties, and both of you, rural properties this year are really going to be under great demand, aren't they? I mean, I'm not. I don't want to say I'm concerned about that, because that's not the right word to use, but there's going to be immense pressure, I think, on these rural properties just because of our demand right now.
Well, you have short supply, and you do have good demand, and it's a lifestyle. There's a lot of people that are coming here in pursuit of that lifestyle, and we can provide that. What we've seen so far is the absorption rate, at the speed at which these properties are on the market, the days on market, is diminished. We haven't seen the kind of price pressure that we've seen on residential stuff in town, but that'll happen.
And they have the highest median price, of course, is for rural properties as compared to residentials. So we're going to see that. And Amy, in your world, we got to be prepared, because we got a lot of new people coming here who've really never done this before. As Curtis says, about lifestyle change.
Right. We want to make sure that all those new rural residents are well educated about how to make sure that their septic system is working properly, especially if they have one of these new systems. They can be complicated, and you have to have a maintenance agreement for them.
You know, Jackson County puts out a rural living handbook, and I think it's still under publication, but it has a lot of good, useful information in it. You know, everything from barking dogs and septics and fences and easements and setbacks, and it's really a good publication.
Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District.
That's what I was going to say, from the JSWCD. Yeah, it's online at jswcd.org. The whole thing is there. Yeah, no, there really is, and I do sense, though, that people who are moving onto these properties are very much aware of the kinds of issues, and they want to do it right. And so I think that's a real good sign. And there are young people moving along a lot of these properties, and retirees. It's a whole mix of people, as we know.
Oregon State Extension has great land steward program, master gardener programs that are really helpful for rural residents as well.
I love the land steward program. Is probably one of my favorite ones, and met many people who've taken those and are managing their property and their rural properties in terrific ways. Well, the strangest thing in real estate probably this week that I've heard was down on Tuesday morning at our John L. Scott office meeting, when Greg Anderson from My Mortgage got up there, and he said that, you won't believe this, he talks about interest rates, and they fell this week to 3.5%. So strange, that is just so strange to me, that you raise an interest rate and all of a sudden either the demand has fallen out the door, because the interest rates have fallen this week to 3.5%. They were 4% just a few weeks ago. Curtis, that's good news for consumers, and it's good news for the real estate market, I guess. And I guess, what more can you say? You better do it now, because I don't know how long they're going to stay, but we've been saying that for years now, you know?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So how can someone get a hold of you if they like to learn more or have information about their wells and things?
Yeah, my firm is Patton Environmental, LLC, and my number is 541-690-9983.
And Curtis, of course, you're at harcourtsorop.com. I love that. I'm getting used to saying that now.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, and good luck to you. And again,
you can say it some more if you want.
And well, I love that. And good luck with selling rural properties, because you're going to be a busy year as well.
Thanks, Pete.
That'll do it for the Real Estate Show today here on KMED this weekend. Thank you for being with us. We're back with you next Saturday out at the Expo Park. Hey, in the meantime, have a great week, everybody, and God bless, and we'll see you next weekend here on KMED.
You've been listening to The Real Estate Show on KMED AM and FM radio, presented by John L. Scott Real Estate of Southern Oregon, along with All Cities Property Management, the Home Builders Association of Jackson County, Ditech Mortgage, the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District, and the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors. For guest information or to watch a past show, visit us online at realestateshoworegon.com. Join us again next weekend for Southern Oregon's one and only Real Estate Show on KMED.